Everybody knows the famous midrash that 4 species represent 4 different types of Jew. And the Lulav, having only good taste but not good smell, represents the Jew that has only Torah and not mitzvot. So the obvious question is, why do we shake the Lulav, right, and not the date? Right? The date is the aspect of that species that has the taste. The Lulav doesn't. Okay? Secondly, if the Lulav only has Torah but not mitzvot, and the etrog has both, so why is it that when we say the blessing with Hashem's name, we say it on the Lulav, on Netilat Lulav, and not the etrog? So this is something I discussed at length last year, and you can watch that whole video if you want. So to cut a long story short, we brought sources like the Ben Miriam that says that the Lulav represents the tzaddik, okay? The good taste represents the reward and the delight that he earns through his Torah study, especially because a tzaddik is studying in order to do mitzvot. So of course, the Lulav is a Jew that has Torah and mitzvot, otherwise he'd be a Rasha, right? But what it's saying is that he studies Torah in order to perform mitzvot, and that's the highest level. So that's why we say the bracha on the Lulav. And why do we shake the Lulav and not the etrog? Well, during the process of Torah, things can often be quite frustrating. We've got pilpul, we've got shaklavataria, the battle for the pshat, right? Anybody who's got a good chavruta can explain that during the toughest moments of learning, you aren't focused on the joy of learning. It's excruciating. You're too busy trying to win. In the end though, all the hard work pays off. You have the answer and you've acquired some Torah, and that's when you experience the joy and the delight in it. About 20 years ago, I went to a Daf Yomi museum in Eretz Yisrael when I was in yeshiva, and Harav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was there. And this was in his later years, and he had terrible Parkinson's disease. And when it was his turn to speak to the crowd, it was a massive crowd, he got up and he walked very slowly to the middle of the stage where the microphone was. And it was painful to watch. He was really in agony. And you could see how hard it was for him, honestly. But he came. He really wanted to inspire some Jews. And he didn't have it in him to give a big speech like everybody else. In fact, all he said was, "The Torah is so sweet." And then he went and sat down again. Lefum Sara Agra. Never in my life was I so moved nor understood this point so well. That's the shaking of the Lulav, the pilpul and the Sarah. So indeed, there's no contradiction. We shake the Lulav, right? Because that's the pilpul, the shaklavataria. We don't shake the date. The date is the agra at the end, the reward at the end. So if you want to hear more, as I said, go and watch the other shir from last year. But this year I want to ask another question about the Lulav. The Mishnah in Sukkot says, Lulav arava shisha v'shiva. We carry the Lulav either 6 days or 7 days. Lulav shiva ketzad, one of the 7 days. Yom tov harishon shel hachag shechal lihiyot b'Shabbat. When the first day of Sukkot is on Shabbat, that's when we carry it the full 7 days. Otherwise, we carry it just 6. That's because it's Doraita. And because it's Doraita, it overrides Shabbat. However, due to a takana by Rabbah, that we might end up carrying it to an expert who's going to show us how to shake it and say the brachas, we don't take it on the rest of the day. So if Shabbat falls on the 2nd day, 3rd day, or whatever, then it doesn't override Shabbat, because then it's only to Rabbana. We don't do that anymore, and the Bartanura says that that's because we don't know how to calculate the months correctly, and we're worried that we might actually get the first day of Yom Tov wrong. So the obvious question is, how can a mere takana override a mitzvah d'oraita? You could ask this about the shofar too, of course, but at least by the shofar, there's a real concern about another d'oraita being performed, skilled labor on Shabbat. With Lulav, it's just tiltul, so it's hard to understand. Now, interestingly, the answer to this is very similar to what we just discussed about why we don't shake the day, as well as what we've been discussing in all the drashot since Rosh Hashanah this year. So let's go back and go through the process and put it all together. On Rosh Hashanah, we were judged. Now, the purpose of that judgment, as we said, was from Hashem's point of view. He was deciding in general if the world was fulfilling its purpose and joy that he envisioned, and also if his beloved children, Yisrael, were becoming who he hoped they would be, and connecting to him, and giving him the relationship that was his joy in creation in specific. He was deciding if the relationship with us was working or not, and that's terrifying. It's a very tough thing to go through. Tzaddikim, always in Rosh Hashanah, terrified, in the same way that a child gets particularly terrified when he upsets his parents so much that they don't even get angry. They actually reconsider whether having them was a good idea in the first place. Once we showed Hashem that we were still worth creating another year, we brought the joy back into the creation in the world, his and ours, right? But still, this joy is suspended in the highest heavens, way beyond reach. We can't feel it yet, because even though we've proven that our relationship with Hashem and each other is alive, we haven't proven that it's well. We've proven that we want to make amends, which is truly a beautiful thing, and that already brings the joy back. That is an essential connection restored. But we still needed to make the amends to bring down the walls that separated us. So we afflicted ourselves on Yom Kippur and engaged in heartfelt teshuvah. We apologized and corrected the damage in our relationship, and we did so through a huge amount of hard work and effort, an entire day of affliction. Still, as we said in my last shiur on Ha'azinu, it's done now, right? We got through it. We made it. It may have seemed impossible at the time, and it was very, very difficult, but that effort that we put in, when it's over and it's all to our credit, we made it, that becomes the joy, right? It transforms into the joy itself. That's why Yom Kippur is described by Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel as the most joyous day of the year. He says that this is the day that we got the second luchot, and thus we did teshuvah for the first time. And as we said, teshuvah doesn't just repair the relationship, it brings it to an infinitely higher plane than ever before. And therefore, it's an immense joy above and on earth, Hashem's joy in creation itself. So here we are, we now have brought this joy back into the world. Now, just like with the Lulav, when we said that during the actual process of learning, it's hard to feel the joy exists in the neshama, but doesn't get felt in the guf until we reach the teretz. The same is true of Yom Kippur. In the thick of it, the joy was there, but it was suspended, and it needed to be brought down through the teshuvah. Until at the end, when it's over, there is a sudden burst of joy, of accomplishment, but above all, knowing that we're clean and everything is resolved and we can shine brightly again in our relationships with our beloveds, the greatest gift that we have in the world, somebody else, without the interruption of things, just real intimacy. So this is the perfect time to build the sukkah. The joy is now tangible in the air, and this is exactly what the sukkah represents. As my children learned, right, it's like a hug from Hashem. We surround ourselves in his mitzvah, and there's no difference between that and hug, by the way. As the Alter Rebbe said, and I mentioned it before, when we hug a person, it's not their body that we're hugging, right? Literally it is, but that's not what we want. We're trying to hug the vitality, their soul, but we can't hug that, right? You can't hug a soul. So we hug the body, and because the body is subservient and connected to the soul, it's the same thing. So too, when we surround ourselves with Hashem's mitzvah of sukkah, we are feeling Hashem's embrace, because the mitzvah truly connects to Hashem. The thing is, the joy is still in the air. It surrounds us, it's palpable, but in that state, it can dissipate. So what we need to do is we need to absorb it and integrate it into the specifics and let it have a positive, lasting effect on every aspect of our soul. And that's why we take the Lulav. By shaking the Lulav, we take the surrounding joy and infuse it into our whole life, into our mind for our Torah learning, into our heart for our mitzvot observant, into our mouths for our relationships, for our tefillah, for our eating, everything. We want the power of Lulav. It captures this amazing light, this amazing awe that fills the world, and it draws it into our very soul to be most tangibly felt and integrated and transform us in a lasting way. So this, the Kabbalists say, is why the takana of the Lulav was acceptable. Shabbat has its own kedusha, and it does what the Lulav does itself, maybe even in a loftier way. That's also why we don't put tefillin on Shabbat, right? Shabbat also takes light and internalizes it. For example, during the week, we eat packed lunches, right? And that's how we get our sustenance. But on Shabbat, the entire table is spread out, it's set. We can come and partake of the food in peace and tranquility, no effort required. We experience and benefit from its oneg automatically. Therefore, we don't need to shake the Lulav, technically speaking, if it's Shabbat, and thus the takana stands. Now, you may ask, then why did we need to shake the Lulav in the times of the Beit HaMikdash? That's because in those days, when the Shekhinah rested among us, there were levels even beyond the joy that we've been discussing. Joys that we haven't seen since then, as it says in the end of Gemara Sota. So, while Shabbat would help us internalize these levels that we're talking about, there were even more levels too back then, and the Lulav would help with those. So that's why Back then, we even took the Lulav in the Medina, not just in the Beit HaMikdash itself. May we all have a joyful Sukkot. Now remember, this joy we're talking about is so great, it's so perfect, it's so good that it can even excite Hashem and bring Him nachat ruach and give Him a purpose in creation. What is the joy? It's the joy of having someone else. Not things, not materialism, but having someone else. Having a relationship, having a holy, good relationship with someone else, with Yisrael, with Hashem. The true joy in this, though, as we have just said, has been obscured for the longest time. It's been thousands of years since we felt it. But in the background, it has been growing exponentially. So this year, may we be zocher to finally bring that joy down in its entirety, to go with the joy that we built through Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. And may we do so especially through our avodah of Sukkot, building a sukkah, shaking the lulav. Chag Sameach.